Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, it's a great pleasure to be here and to be talking to you this evening about what I have titled 7 Keys to Success. So yesterday I was at the IIUM and someone asked me, why 7 keys to success? So I said, because I got stuck at 7. If I had thought of 8 keys, then it would be 8 keys to success. So 7 is not some kind of magical number or something like this. It's any number of keys to success. So we'll launch off straight into what these are, and then I am hoping to be able to answer at least some of the questions that you ask me. And as the brother said, we request you to keep the questions to the topic, and so that we can finish by tomorrow morning at least, inshallah. We'll quickly run down the list of these keys to success, and then we'll take each of these in more detail. As it says on the list, I don't usually like to read lists, but just for the heck of it. Number 1 is, without power, you're going nowhere, so you need to connect to the power. Number 2 is, eliminate the noise. Number 3 is, focus on what you can personally control or influence. Number 4, analyze objectively and face the brutal facts. Number 5, relentlessly measure results, first your own. And do remember that all these words are weighed and measured and put there very deliberately. So when I'm saying brutal facts and relentlessly measure, I mean exactly that. I do not mean anything other than that. Number 6, empower people. The doorman is also people. And the last one is, challenge yourself and don't worry about who gets the credit. So these are the 7 keys to success. Is this clear to you? Yes? All right, then I think we can go home, because the saying there in the red box is not one of my own, but something I read somewhere and I thought it was very nice, so I'm sharing it with you. I have no idea who said it, because it didn't say where I read who said it. But it's a very interesting thing. It says that everything that is faced cannot be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. And therefore, I think it's very important for us to lead lives that are completely honest with ourselves. And when I'm saying honesty, I don't mean, thou shalt not pick thy brother's pocket. Not that kind of honesty. I mean, that obviously you don't do that. But I'm saying honesty about looking at your own life, and especially looking at what we call our problems in life, and facing them squarely and saying, well, here is this problem, and what do I need to do about this? And not hedge around it and try to export the blame onto somebody else and saying, well, my problem is because of this one or that one. So let's look at each of these in some more detail. The number 1 of these is, connect to the power. And the power is the Creator who made you and me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who is Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a piece out of what has come to be known as my bird khutbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who made a bird which is about that big, which is called the bar-tailed godwit. Now, this is obviously this bird was named by an Englishman, because no one in the world can name things bar-tailed godwits except Englishmen. So, and obviously it's a good thing that birds don't understand English, because I think that bird would be very seriously offended to be called a bar-tailed godwit. I mean, how many of you would like to be called a bar-tailed godwit, for God's sake? I mean, you know. So anyway, this bird is called a bar-tailed godwit. It's about that big, the size of a snipe. In the good old days of snipe hunting, when I was a child, when you told people the size of a snipe, they knew what you were talking about. Today, I don't know how many of my young friends here know what is a snipe. These are among the many things that your generation does not know, apart from kerosene stoves which smoked and so forth. So anyway, now the bar-tailed godwit. Now, why am I talking to you about bar-tailed godwits? Because it's an amazing bird. The bar-tailed godwit migrates. It takes off in Alaska and flies all the way down to New Zealand. Now, picture the globe. It takes off here and goes right down like that. 11,000 kilometers. It flies in 9 days and nights, continuously, without food, without water, without sleep. And the bar-tailed godwit is that big, and the reason I said it's that big is because it's not an albatross with a 12-foot wingspan. It's not coasting on thermals. It's flapping its wings. What does it mean? I want you to think about this. What is the meaning of saying it flies 11,000 kilometers in 9 days and nights? What does it mean? It means the sun rises, the sun sets, the sun rises, the sun sets, the sun rises, the sun sets, the bird is flying. It means there is a snowstorm and the bird is flying. It means there is a rainstorm and the bird is flying. It takes off and it goes. No food, no water, no sleep. 9 days, 9 nights. Who is Allah? Allah is the one who created this bird. The question I want you to ask yourself is, why? Why create a bird? Make this bird live in Alaska and then decree that in the winter it must fly 11,000 miles down to New Zealand. If it was a matter of getting out of the cold, you don't need to travel 11,000 miles to get out of the cold. All you need to come down to Florida and you got all the heat you want. Why 11,000 miles? Why New Zealand? Why 9 days and 9 nights without sleep? They researched and they found they know what happens, but they don't know how it happens. They found that half the brain sleeps and half the brain is awake while the bird is in flight. They haven't the foggiest how that happens. But they've come to the point now, they've discovered that yes, this happens. Half the brain sleeps and half the brain is awake. Ask yourself why. What is the need to create such a creature and then do this for this creature? Second one, another bird. And this one is called the bar-headed goose. There's something about Englishmen and bars. This is called the bar-headed goose. Now, what about the bar-headed goose? What about the bar-headed goose is that if you are flying from Malaysia to Australia, for example, and when your plane is cruising at an elevation of 32,000 or 33,000 feet, which is where the transcontinental jetliners cruise, and you look out of your window and you see a goose, you are not drunk, you are not dreaming, you have actually seen a goose. I hope that does not happen to you, because you don't want to be seeing a goose out of your plane window at 33,000 feet, because that's not good news. If it gets sucked into your engine, then you become history. The bar-headed goose is the highest flying creature on earth. They take off and they go to 33,000 feet for exactly the same reason why jetliners fly at that speed, because they want to hit the jet stream current, which is a current of air that travels at a speed of 1,000 miles a day. And why do they want to hit that current? Because it takes you places. You can fly long distances without much effort if you are in that current of air. Except that there is a problem with being up there. You know what that problem is? The problem is the temperature there is minus 59 degrees Celsius. Now take the same bar-headed goose and perform the halal, say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and stick it in your fridge, in the freezer at minus 4, and it freezes. And the same bar-headed goose at 33,000 feet is flying alive and well at a temperature of minus 59 degrees Celsius. Ask, what? What did you ask? Hello? Why? Why? What is the need for the creator of the universe to create this bird and decree that it must fly and migrate once again from the Arctic Circle down to India, down to Africa, in this way of hitting the jet stream current where the oxygen is next to nothing and where the temperature is minus 59 degrees Celsius? Why? Another amazing thing they discovered about the bar-headed goose is that its metabolism is best at low oxygen levels. Can you imagine? I mean, just think about this. It breathes best when there's no oxygen. If you're still not impressed with your creator and my creator, let me tell you one more story. And this is about a very small bird. This bird is called the ruby-throated hummingbird. And I've actually seen these birds. I've seen all of these, but I've seen these ruby-throated hummingbirds in their natural environment, because in a previous incarnation I used to live in South America and Guyana, and I've seen them in the Amazonian rainforest. The first time I saw one of them, I thought it was a moth, because it was so small and it was beating its wings so rapidly. It has a wing beat of 1,000 RPM. 1,000 revolutions per minute. So it goes buzz. It's the only bird which can fly backwards. It has a long beak, and it inserts it in the flower to suck the nectar and flies backwards. It's like a helicopter. It goes this way, anyway. How big is this bird? The biggest, the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the ruby-throated hummingbird, weighs 4 grams. That is 1 gram less than 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon is 5 grams. Now, why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story because, once again, the ruby-throated hummingbird lives in South America, in the Amazonian rainforest, which begin around Chile and further south. And this one migrates north to North America. Part of that journey is straight across the Gulf of Mexico, a distance of 600 miles. I want you to again visualize this. This little thing that big, is flying 600 miles across the open ocean. It takes a period of 26 hours. I challenge you, those of you who think you are fit, walk, run, crawl, 600 miles in 26 hours and I'll give you $1 million per. And a little bird that big does it 600 miles across the open ocean in 26 hours. 2 points. A ruby-throated hummingbird is not a water bird. If it gets tired in the middle of the journey and it lands in the water, what happens to it? It becomes fish food. Second point, what is the meaning of 26 hours? 26 hours is 1 day, 1 night, and 2 hours. Imagine this little bird that big is flying all day. The sun goes to its zenith, the bird is flying. The sun starts to set, the bird is flying. The sun has completely set, the bird is flying. The moon rises, the bird is flying. On the night when there is no moon and it is a pitch dark night, the bird is flying across the open ocean. It's not going around in circles, it's going in the right direction. The sun comes up again, the bird is still flying. 2 hours into the next day, the bird lands in the United States of America. What's the question to ask? Can't hear you. Why? Why? The reason I want you to ask why is because we Muslims believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who feeds the entire universe. Yes or no? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the power to feed anything, anywhere. He's not dependent on taking a little bird that big from South America and sending it all the way to North America or across 600 miles of ocean only to feed it. You mean Allah can't find food for that little bird where it lives? You mean Allah can't find food for that bar-tailed godwit where it lives? So why? And the Quran tells us why. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ صَافَّاتٍ وَيَقْبِضْنَ مَا يُمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا الرَّحْمَنُ إِنَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ بَصِيرٌ. Allah says, do they not see the birds flying above them, beating their wings? Who is it that holds them up except the one who created them, Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ala kulli shay'in basir, He sees everything which exists. That is why. Why? So that we can recognize our Creator. So that we can recognize our Rabb. So who is Allah? The first point, the first secret of success is to recognize the source of power and to connect into the source of power, because if you have no power, you achieve nothing. So who is Allah? I can't do better than to use the introduction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given of Himself. Before this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned something else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if this kalam, if this message of His, if this word of His had been sent down onto a mountain, and the mountain understood this word, then the mountain would humble itself and would disintegrate into dust because of the khashyat of Allah, because of the fear of Allah in its heart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that we give these similes and these examples so that you people can think and reflect. And after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us who He is. So Allah first said لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. And then Allah introduced Himself. And that's the translation of what I am about to recite. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر. سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. I'm reciting for you the word of your Rabb so that you hear the word itself. And of course, there is the translation of what it means. So point number 1 out of 7, connect with the source of power. Point number 2, eliminate the noise. You know, today we live in a world where the issue is not lack of information, but the issue is an overload of information. An overload of information. We have all kinds of information, and the big challenge is what to do with all this information. And therefore, it's very important to decide what is important and what is not important. So, eliminate the noise. How to do that? Here are the tools. Create filters. My rule is if I tell you what I do, then I will get some arguments. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what I do. I'll tell you what I think you should do. I have told you here, don't read all newspapers. I don't read any newspapers. Now you might say, well, how do you know what's happening? And that's my theory. My theory is that whatever you need to know, somebody will tell you. And second theory is that every day at least 2 people will tell you wrong things. So you have to filter that also and see what you're getting, whether it is correct or not. It's not as bad as that. I mean, I subscribe to 2 news consolidators, which give me the kind of news I'm looking for. So to say I read nothing is not true, but I'm getting close to that. Same thing applies to all emails. Same thing applies to forwards. Never ever forward a mail and never ever read a forward. Like seriously, I mean, somebody can't be bothered to write your email ID on it. I'm not going to read it. Simple. For example, people have been sending me for the last, I think, 10 years, photographs of the Hajj in the 1950s. Now, why on earth is it so interesting to watch the photographs of the Hajj in 1950s again and again and again for more than 10 years? I mean, so if you're going to read everything you get, you just don't have enough time. Key rule with all information is the last point on that. Ask yourself, what did I learn or gain? That's the basic rule. What did I learn or gain? So read whatever you want. Ask yourself, what did I learn? What did I gain? And if you find that when you're reading something, you're getting an answer a couple of times to say, I really don't think I learned much in this. I really don't think I gained anything in it. Stop reading it. Now, why am I saying that? Because there is a lot of confusion in the minds of people. We use these words interchangeably, although each one has a very specific meaning and they're not interchangeable at all. Data is not information, information is not knowledge, knowledge is not wisdom. All of these are different things. And we look at what they are. Many of you must have heard this proverb, knowledge is power, yes? My take on this is knowledge is not power. Knowledge is not power because data is not information. Data is stuff. S-T-U-F-F. A lot of it is garbage. G-A-R-B-A-G-E. It's still data. Information is not knowledge at all. If information was knowledge, you wouldn't have the peaks and slumps in the stock market. Because no one is better informed than stockbrokers. Then how come peaks and slumps happen? You wouldn't have IT companies going down the drain. We're supposed to be information technology companies. The information is not knowledge. And knowledge is not wisdom. And neither knowledge is power nor wisdom is power. So what must one do? We need to add value to each of these. So with all information, ask this question. So what? Anything you read, anything you hear, ask yourself this question. So what? Someone says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the universe. You say, so what? Seriously, ask this question, so what? I mean, you're not being disrespectful. You're saying, so what? So you need to recognize Him. Why? Because one day you're going to die. That's why. And then you're going to be resurrected before Him. That's why. Now you say, I don't believe that. No problem. Don't believe it. Nothing changes. Reality is that which does not depend on belief for its existence. The difference between free fall and flight is what? Is the ending. Seriously. Two guys take off from a plane 20,000 feet in the air. One guy says, I do not believe in the laws of aerodynamics. And the other guy tells them, you know what, if you are going to jump out of this plane without a parachute, man, you are already dead. You are already dead even while you are alive. Please note my words. And this chap says, you're crazy. How can I be dead and alive at the same time? I said, you can be. You can be dead and alive at the same time because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the one in whose heart there is no dhikr of Allah is dead. But he's breathing. So he said, I don't believe you. So they go up in the air, 20,000 feet, and they jump. One guy is jumping with a parachute. He pulls his ripcord and the chute flares up. And he's floating down and the other guy has no chute. Now they're coming down from 20,000 feet at 15,000 feet. The guy without the chute is telling the one with the chute, he's saying, man, you told me I'm dead, yeah? I mean, look at me. Look at me. Not only am I not dead, I'm actually traveling faster than you. Because this guy without a chute, he is traveling, what's his speed? Speed of free fall of an object in the air is what? 32 feet per second per second. That's his speed. So he's saying, you're floating along slowly, man. I mean, look at me. I'm, zooming. So what does this guy tell him? He tells him, wait for a few more seconds. Because you are about to have a very holy ending. You will make a hole in the ground. Not believing in the laws of aerodynamics does not change the law And when you come into the realm of aerodynamics, that law will apply to you. The law of aerodynamics, you are sitting on the ground here, no problem. We can say, I'm sorry, I don't believe in aerodynamics. No problem. But the day we decide to fly, you better believe in aerodynamics if you know what's good for you. Because if you don't believe in aerodynamics, then that day is the last day that you are alive. Because you're going to be very dead. The key thing about fundamental laws is fundamental laws come into play when you come into their realm. And what is the fundamental law of life? What is the fundamental law of life? كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. That is the fundamental law of life. That everything which lives will die. And the only one who lives, for whom there is no death, the Hayyul Ladhi La Yamut, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you are alive, then the fundamental law of life applies to you, irrespective of whether you believe in it or not, because it doesn't matter. And that is the point I'm saying. Any piece of information you hear, ask, so what? So what if I don't believe in the fundamental rule of life? Ask the question. So what is power? This is the value addition we need to do. Organized data is information, not random data. Random data is garbage. Organized data is information. Leveraged information is knowledge. Conceptualized knowledge, knowledge that has been taken and put into a form where it can be transmitted, is wisdom. And applied wisdom gives power, not knowledge. And as we know, an ounce of wisdom is worth, an ounce of power is worth more than a ton of wisdom. Point number 3 out of 7, focus on what you can control directly and can influence. Why am I saying that? Because one of our pastimes in this life today is to focus on things that we have no control over. And we spend a lot of time and energy talking about this and that and the other, things that we have no control over, and really it's a waste of time. So we talk about what the President of the United States should do with regard to US foreign policy in China. But since you are not, probably, I don't mean you meaning you as an individual, but as the normal garden variety common man, you are unlikely to get past the security guard in the White House. That great piece of advice that you would like to give to the President of the United States is wasted. So focus on what you can control directly or can influence. And I'm differentiating these two because it's not always necessary to directly speak to somebody to influence them. You can also influence through other people. One of my students, who is currently the head of intelligence in one of the states in India, in the police, she phoned me once and she told me, I have to do a debate, and the debate is on the issue of human rights and the application of third-degree methods for interrogation. Now, third-degree methods is a polite way of saying torture. So she said, I have a debate and I am supposed to be speaking about this, and I want you to help me. So I said, what is this debate about? She said that this debate is all the police organizations in India, which is the police forces of all the states, plus the paramilitary forces, plus the Central Bureau of Investigation, plus the CID, plus the and so on and so on. I mean, let me not go into all the names. Now, all of them are going to be presenting these. There's going to be a debate. They're going to be speaking on both sides of the equation. And the final debate will be in the presence of the Prime Minister of India and all the Directors General of Police of all the police organizations. So it's a very high power, high profile thing. So she said, I want you to help me with that. So I said, what side of the equation are you speaking on? So she said, what do you think? So I said, all right, so I will help you. Now, I made a small presentation, I think about 7 or 8 slides, because it had to be short. And I sent it off to her. About 2 or 3 months passed. And then I got a call, and she said, we won. Now, by then I had forgotten what the whole thing was. So I said, we won what? Who is we? She said, you and me. I said, we won what? He said, we won the debate. And then I recalled what the debate was. And she said that she was given the first prize, and the ideas that were put forward in that note were taken as official government policy of the government of India. So I said, what did you do with my note? I mean, I sent it to her. I said, you are welcome to change it around as much as you want. She said, I did nothing with it. She said, I did not do anything with it. I just delivered it verbatim as you had written it, word for word. I'm talking about influence. So effectively, what I wrote influenced government policy at the highest level in the police organization in India, including the Prime Minister of India, without me having set foot into that room. And if you think about it, I mean, that's an internal departmental thing. Unless you are from the police department, obviously they won't invite you. So it is possible to influence, and the reason I'm saying this to you is that one of the keys of success is to conceptualize thought and to write things and to speak about things in a structured manner, because you don't know how thoughts influence people across the world. So things that you directly control and things that you can influence, both are equally important to think about. And the bottom line of that is not to be so concerned about what happened, but to be concerned about what you can do about what is happening. Once again today, because of the bombardment of information that comes across us, we are told about global events, and this is happening in Palestine, and that is happening in Iraq, and this is happening in Egypt, and that is happening in somewhere and somewhere. We are full of information about what is happening where, but if you ask the person and say, well, so this is happening in Iraq, therefore what are you doing? And the general answer is, well, what am I supposed to do? What can I do? I can't do anything. Well, if you can't do anything, then why are you spending your time and energy worrying about what's happening in Iraq? You can't do anything. So think about what you can do, or get out of there and do something where you can actually make some use of your time. The key to success is not to throw away your resource, which is your time. So ask yourself this question. Number one, how much do you really want this thing? How much do you really want to achieve that? And what are you prepared to do for it? 4 out of 7, analyze objectively yourself and your actions and face the brutal facts. And I'm saying brutal facts deliberately because some of that stuff is difficult to face. I was speaking yesterday to someone in IIUM, and one of the questions they said, my health will be affected if I wake up for tahajjud. So I said, I completely agree. And that's the reason I think we should wake up for tahajjud. your health will be affected positively, and that's a good thing to happen. So face the brutal facts. There is a 4-letter word for that, which is called LAZY. So assess your assets and liabilities. Assets and liabilities in this case is not financial. Its number one asset and liability is attitude. Number two asset and liability is our relationship with people. Number three asset and liability is our manners. And so on and so on. I won't go into all the details of it, but do that assessment for yourself. Decide where you can contribute and what. Don't spread yourself thin across the world. Focus on something and stay with that. What is the difference between this light and laser? Focus. Diffuse light like this at best gives illumination. Laser cuts through steel. Focus, the same thing. And that's what we need to do with our lives. Focus, because we don't have all the time in the world. We have only that much of time and we have only that much of energy. And if you don't focus, then you find that you are spread out in 10 different directions and nothing is achieved. It sounds nice. Well, I am involved in this and this and this and this. Sounds nice. May even look nice on your CV to someone who does not know how to read CVs. But anyone who reads my book, Hiring Winners, will not be impressed with that. Now you see how I managed to also tell you that I wrote a book called Hiring Winners. Then decide on metrics to assess results. Measure. You know, the key to quality is measurement. I'm involved in several quality programs in various companies across the world. One of the best ones is called 6 Sigma quality, where you measure the number of mistakes that are made, because the theory behind 6 Sigma is you can't measure what is good, you can measure what goes wrong. And if you eliminate everything that goes wrong, then automatically the result is good. And 6 Sigma, to give you an idea of measurement, if I tell you that I have a process which is 99% correct, would you say that is good or bad? 99% correct. Good or bad? Good. 99% correct is 10,000 mistakes per million. 6 Sigma is 3.4 mistakes per million. That is the difference. Aircraft engines which go on the Airbus aircraft are made by GE, which is less than 3.4 mistakes per million. And if they were made by anyone who was doing it at 99%, I don't think you would want to fly in that plane. At 33,000 feet elevation, you do not want something which has 10,000 mistakes per million, yes? And assess risks and make contingency plans. And do remember this, you can only fool yourself, not anybody else. Before we go to point number 5, I want to quickly talk to you about resilience, because this is one of the issues that happens with us, where when we hit a wall, we give up. We make a mistake, something fails, and we give up, and that's not a good thing. So what happens in times of turmoil? What happens in times of disaster? And we are currently living in such a time, I think. Almost every day there is news of one thing or the other. What happens at these times? 4 different things. Number 1, disorientation. Number 2, depression. Number 3, loss of purpose. And number 4, fear of annihilation. Varying degrees. What's the 3-step solution to that? Number 1, face the facts. Face the brutal facts. There is enormous amount of research to show that concentration camp victims who survived Some of the worst concentration camps in history were people who did not fool themselves and think that they are going to be rescued tomorrow morning. They faced the facts and they said, here we are and here we are to stay. We do not know for how long. Ask how it happened. Ask what else you could have done. But don't blame anyone and don't praise yourself or anyone else. And while you're facing the facts, also remember, never lose hope in final success. No matter how difficult the task seems to be, always remember that you will succeed as long as you stay in there long enough. Many times it's amazing how many case histories are there to prove this, that many times the only reason somebody wins is because they were there. The others dropped off by the wayside. Number 2, the learning cycle. Own what happened, accept. The beauty of change is that you cannot change what you do not own. If there is a problem with you and you believe that this problem is really not with you, it is somebody else's fault, then you know the problem, the actual problem there, the problem is that that fault will remain with you forever. You can only change what you own. What you do not own, you cannot change. So if there is something that is bothering you, whether it is your marriage, whether it is your career, whether it is your business, if it is not going the way you want it to go, what is the number one thing to do? First, accept that it is yours. If your marriage is like Scotch whiskey on the rocks, then it's your marriage and you are part of that issue. If you say, no, but you see, it is my mother-in-law's fault, then we're not talking about your mother-in-law's marriage. Your mother-in-law's marriage is fine. It's yours that's in problems. The same applies to your career. You say, well, you know what, my career is going nowhere because I've got this boss who does not like Muslims, or he does not like Muslims with beards, or he does not like Muslim women with hijab. So it's the boss's problem. So guess what? What are you going to do? You're going to resign and you're going to go and get another job. And you know what? You're going to take your problem with you now to the new company. And you will find that this thing repeats and repeats and repeats. And if you don't believe me, ask Elizabeth Taylor. No matter how many husbands you change, if you don't learn the lesson, the problem doesn't go away. It's still there. It's because it's yours. So you have to own it. And once you own it, then you analyze what is it that is going wrong. You fix it, and then you monitor it to see whether it's working fine, and then you go tell others so that others can also benefit. All right? I remind myself and you that the difference between falling and failing is whether or not you decide to get up. Last point on this is make meaning of what is going wrong, analyze the reasons and so on, see how you could have prevented it, see what to do in the future. And always, always, always look to a better future ahead, because if you learn those lessons, then your future indeed will be very good. So never lose hope. If you lose hope, then you won't work. And that's the reason why it's very important. And very important in this keeping the hope alive business is to create immediate working goals. You know, activity is a very good antidote to depression. So anytime you're feeling low, go for a run. You feel much better. Go for a long walk. And create working goals. What do I need to do to starting now? Make a timetable, make a program. As I told you, there are no sure answers for some of these things. So you have to improvise your way through that, whatever turmoil is happening, and you will find that if you do that intelligently, you will find that as you go along, you also learn the lessons you need to learn, and eventually you find success. So improvise your way as you go along. 5 out of 7, relentlessly measure results, first your own. As I told you, measurement is the key to success, and winning is a measurable fact. How do you know which team wins in football or basketball or cricket or whatever? How do you know? In football, how do you know which team wins? Hello? Score, right? Now, supposing you say, well, you know what, forget the score thing. You see how hard I played. I'm covered with mud, and, my shirt, I take it out, I squeeze it, and it's a river of sweat. Yeah? So I should be given, my team should be the team which wins. Sorry, it doesn't work like that. If you didn't score the goals, no matter how hard you worked, you're not a winner. And that's the hard reality of life. It's a numbers game. So you want to be a winner, learn to count. And that's why measurement is very important. 6 out of 7, empower people. I can't emphasize this more. Believe me, in the 97 years that I have lived, and in the hundreds of thousands of people that I have trained, and that last one is actually true, one thing I have learned, and that is that it's not only elephants who have long memories, so also people. And just like elephants, or unlike elephants, the people tend to remember only the nasty facts. The good is forgotten, taken for granted. And that's why there's a wonderful saying. They say, friends come and go, but enemies accumulate. The friends come and go, but enemies accumulate. So don't make enemies. And you'll be surprised how many people make enemies on a regular basis. And when I say enemies, I don't mean necessarily enemies as in somebody wanting to kill you, no. But people who you do the wrong by for no rhyme or reason. So you've got a person here who feels he has been used. You've got a person there who feels that you disregarded them. You've got a person there who feels that you took away something that belonged to them. And it all adds up. It all adds up. Build goodwill. I was 19 years old when I had my first job in South America in the middle of nowhere in the rainforest, and my boss was a man called Nick Adams, and he taught me a lesson. He taught me many lessons. One of the first ones he taught me, which stayed with me all these years now, he told me life is a bank account. What you put in there is what you have. And when you need it, you only got what you put in there. And when do you put it in? When you don't need it. So that it's there when you need it. Now what am I talking about? Not money. I'm talking about goodwill. I'm talking about good relationships. He said, be nice to people when you don't need them. Be nice to people when that person is somebody you probably will never see for the rest of your life. Be nice to people when they mean nothing, because the day will come when you will need them. And then it will be there. And it's very amazing in life. I have seen many times. In my other incarnation, I am a business consultant. And a lot of my business I have got from people indirectly, referred by various people, various other people. So now here is a person who is a friend of mine. He never gave me any business directly, but he referred me to 10 other people who gave me business. Now, I didn't make friends with him because he will give me business. I just made friends with him because I'm a nice guy, believe it or not. So So it's very important how we treat people. And two words which sometimes we forget in our vocabulary, in some cases they don't exist, in some other cases we forget them. And those, what are the two words? Thank you and sorry. Very important. Two extremely important words. If you do something wrong, apologize. Absolutely, apologize. It is simpler and cheaper and less painful to apologize immediately than to live with that for the rest of your life. And believe me, as I told you, people have got very long memories when it comes to negative stuff. They'll never forget the negative stuff. Say one wrong thing and that will stay with that guy in his mind for the rest of his life. That's the reality. We can't help that. That's how life is. One of the things I teach is customer service, and I tell people, one day in one of my workshops, a man, they say the customer is king. Somebody said, customer is God. I said, customer is not God. He said, why not? I said, because God forgives, customers don't. And the same thing applies to people. So be respectful to people. Nobody complains with getting too much respect. People can complain about getting too little respect. So go over the top. You don't have to look at somebody and say, Your Holiness, I am at your feet. It's not necessary to say that, but be nice to people. I mean, be respectful. Very important, listen. Do you know the difference between hearing and listening? Yes or no? Let me see if you know the difference between hearing and listening. Quick exercise. Please put out your right hand. Do it fast. Put out your right hand. Put out your right hand. Go on, man, move. Put out your right hand. I want you to do that. Do what I'm doing. Put out your right hand. Do what I'm doing. Put out your right hand. Hold your nose. How many wrong? I said, do what I am doing. I said, hold your nose, and I did this, and you all held your nose. The difference between listening and hearing. All right? And do remember, a show of respect is not respect. People feel love. They feel respect. You can't pretend to like somebody. It doesn't work. Last one, challenge yourself. Believe me, no one dies of hard work. Challenge yourself. Push yourself. You never know the best you can do. Push yourself. Go over the top, and you suddenly discover, oh, I could do this as well. Very nice. Now, new target. The most powerful limit is in the mind. I don't know how many of you have actually seen this, and that's why I've said the elephant is tied with a coil rope. Those of you from India, anybody from India here? I don't mean your ancient forefathers. I'm talking about India. If those of you are from India, even if you're not from India, take my word for it, I'm not lying. You know what they do if you've ever been to an elephant training camp, and if you haven't been to an elephant training camp, I hereby extend to you an invitation to come and visit me, and I'll take you to an elephant training camp. What they do is they have these little elephant calves. So it's about maybe 2-year-old, 3-year-old, is about this big. He goes out with his mother grazing and so on. When he comes back in the evening, they tie him with the right hind leg with a coconut coir rope. Regular coconut coir rope is about that thick, and they tie him to the stake. Now that little one, he doesn't like being tied, so he fights it. So he will kick and he will pull and scream and squeal and do all sorts of stuff, but the rope is too strong for him. It's a thick rope, right? So he can't break it. He's at that age, at that size, he doesn't have the strength to break that rope. You know, something happens to him after a while. And you know what that thing is? He believes that he cannot break that rope. And then you will be amazed. You see these huge animals. You see a big male Asiatic elephant is smaller than an African elephant, but even a big male Asiatic elephant weighs close to 5 tons. It stands almost 12 feet at the shoulder, because that is true for us. The biggest limitation in the mind of the human being is that he believes he cannot do something. And that's why Henry Ford, the famous saying of Henry Ford, he said that if you tell me that you can or cannot do something, I agree. Either way. He said, if you tell me that you can or cannot do something, I agree. He said, why should I argue with you? I mean, if you believe you can't do something, fine. I'm not going to argue with you. But if you decide to change your mind and say, you know what, I've been wrong all along. I am sure I can do this thing. I'm going to find a way of doing it. I also agree. I don't know, some of you are on my emailing group and you would have read an article I wrote called The Power of Yet, Y-E-T. If you haven't read it, send me an email, I'll send you the article. Last one, 7.1. I just thought about it just now and I didn't want to change the title to 8 secrets. I keep it at 7 secrets, 7.1. That's what you learn from Microsoft, right? Don't worry about who gets the credit. 2 reasons. Number 1 is because that is a limitation to the spread of your ideas. And number 2, you will always get the credit. Doesn't go anywhere. There's a Harry Truman, the same guy who invented that saying which says the buck stops here. He also says another interesting thing, and he said, it's amazing how much gets done if you don't care who gets the credit. And that is the last of the secret success, and that's where we are. So I will close at this point, and any questions and so forth that you would like to ask, if there are any, I will be happy to answer.
So, do you have any questions?
وإياكم.
Or you can SMS the question to 019 268 2783. The number will remain anonymous, inshallah. We'll delete it thereafter.
Those are my emails and websites. Yahwehbig.com is the business website. .org is the Islamic website, and and that's the email. So do anybody, if you wish to email me, you can do that. Yes, any questions? I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions, anyone?
Great, lovely.
You have a question?
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Question regarding what you mentioned earlier on focus. When you focus on something, is it right to just limit your focus to a handful of things, or can you focus on multiple things at any one go?
I believe that it's important to focus on only one thing, not even a handful of things. One thing. Now that one thing, you might define it in such a way that it comprises of a couple of more things. That's possible. But unless you're focusing on one thing, it's more than likely that you will spread yourself out too thin and in the end not achieve what you wanted to achieve.
So working in, say for example, in the business world where, for example, you have multiple projects that are taking place, how do you kind of refine your focus to make sure that you're not going to be spreading yourself thin?
By looking at in the projects that you're doing, looking at where are your key strengths, and you focus on projects which help you to work with those key strengths. Now that may be several projects, that's fine, but it's your key strength that you're looking at there. right? But if you are doing too many diverse things, the problem with unrelated diversification is that, which is that it tends to spread you too thin, and obviously you're not the expert in all of them, and so some of them will, and the things that you are actually expert in will also take a beating, because your energy and so forth is going into things that will be obviously more difficult to do. So they take away a lot of stuff. It's a call that you have to take. When I started in my business, for example, in consulting, at that time there were three major things that were in the scenario. One was recruitment, because that was the time in the 90s, early 90s, the IT companies had come into India, and a lot of people were recruiting for IT. And so therefore, everyone and his wife was a recruitment consultant. So when I started my business in 1994, when I launched my company, people said, why don't you go into recruitment? So that was one option. The second option was to do sales training, right? Just teach people to sell. And the third one was leadership development. Now, what I decided was, I said, what is closest to my heart? What do I love to do the most? And for me, that was a no-brainer. It was leadership development all the way. So I said, recruitment, I'm really not adding any value. Taking somebody's CV from here and handing it over to somebody else. Yes, you make money, but I'm not interested in that. And I find no excitement in that, so I'm not going to go into that. Sales training, well, same kind of reason. Leadership development, absolutely, that's what I love to do. That's where my interest lies. So I consciously chose to pick leadership development, which means that I chose not to do recruitment and not to do sales training. That's a tough decision, especially at a time when I needed the money and there was money to be made in those things. But today, 20-something years down the road, I am extremely happy that I took that decision, because my recognition globally and everything else today is based on leadership development. And that would not have happened if I was also in recruitment and I was also here and also there. Another thing which happened, one of the reasons which told me that I was doing the right thing was that people were very allergic to recruitment consultants, because you don't want me to come in your organization because you don't know who I will take away from there. But at the same time, I still have to go talk to you. So it was a kind of suspicious, relationship with people. But with me, that didn't happen, because I was not I made it very clear, I'm not in recruitment. Goodbye. So now I became a mentor, I became a coach, I became, all sorts of good things. And that opened a lot of doors for me in terms of business. But was it a difficult call? Yes. You have to, but I believe that call has to be taken. And what's the criterion to use? The criterion I use is, what do I love to do the most? Because my theory is very simple. My theory is that, and this is true for men, and it's true probably also for women who work full-time. But if you, on an average, a person will work for about 35 to 40 years of life. Your working life is about 35 years to 40 years. Take the average lifespan. If you take the average lifespan, and I'm talking about the average active lifespan, and may Allah give you all long and active lives, but the average active lifespan is about 70 years. Right? Now, out of that 70 years, the first, say 15 or even 20 years, most people are no good to nobody. I mean, they are what I call net resource drains. I mean, that's a sort of unkind term to use for young people, but I mean, that's effectively what they are. I mean, they're just taking and taking and taking and taking and taking, and nothing, no contribution at the end of the day. So that's first 20 years of your life. Take out 20 out of 70, you got 50. Divide that by 35, you're looking at 85% of your lifespan. Now, if you're doing something that you don't absolutely love, according to me, then that's a very stupid way of living your life, because you're living 85% of your life doing something you basically don't like. I mean, what kind of life is that? And that's why when people say, I am going off on a holiday because I want to get away from it all, or somebody says TGIF, the American term, TGIF, thank God it's Friday. The first time this happened, this came to India, there's a good friend of mine in Bangalore, chap called Pradeep Singh, he started a new company. He came, he told me, come over this evening, today we are having a TGIF. I said, who's that? So he says, thank God it's Friday. So I said, come over and do what? He said, it's beer and samosas. So I said, well, I don't drink beer. He said, that's okay, we'll give you something else. So I told him, Pradeep, just give me a second. I said, let me ask you this thing. Are your people really saying, thank God it's Friday? He said, what do you mean? I said, you just told me, you said it's this end of Friday day party. You are giving a party end of Friday and you're calling it thank God it's Friday, and people are now going off for a weekend. I said, seriously, I'm asking you a serious question. Are your people really saying thank God it's Friday? So Pradeep tells me, man, you are a real stick in the mud. I mean, you are a killjoy like nobody's business. So I said, you agree with me or not? He said, yeah, you're right. I mean, you're bloody right. I mean, I wish you weren't right, but you're an absolute killjoy. You know, my party is destroyed. I said, yeah, I mean, you mean to tell me that people are coming to work for you 5 days a week, and at the end of that 5th day, they are saying, my God, thank God this week is over. Now, if that is happening to you, what kind of an organization are you running? You know what I'm saying? I mean, what kind of an organization are you running? And this is the insanity of organization running. People actually have parties, thank God. I mean, you must have a party, thank God it's Monday. Now, that doesn't speak very well of your home life. I mean, I'm saying that shouldn't happen. But I'm just saying that another thing we have. Your best sales guy, he's busted all targets. He's a sort of powered wheel, whatever, right? He's selling like crazy. Now, what do you do with him? And end of the year, he's busted every target in history. So what do? You send him off on an all expense paid vacation to the Bahamas for 3 weeks. So it's fantastic. So you know what I say to you if you do that? I say to you that, you know what? You've done 2 fantastic things. Number 1, you just took your best salesman off the street for 3 weeks. Now, that's a very stupid thing to do. Number 2, you just gave him. All right. Any other questions? I mean, Sajid had the only hand up. That's why I made such a long answer. But
I forgot a question here.
Okay.
First SMS question. What are the best areas to pinpoint for measurement?
What are the best things to pinpoint? All right.
What are the best areas?
Yeah, they asked the toughest questions. Best areas to pinpoint depends on the results that you want to achieve. So what you need to do is first write down the results you want to achieve. I believe in this business of working backwards. You want to see what does that final product look and what kind of teachers and how many hours and whatnot. Most people work it the other way around. They say, we are going to be teaching the IGCSE or we are going to be teaching the IBO syllabus. You say, well, why the IBO? And you scratch your head and say, well, you know what, I never thought of that. So you work backwards. Look at your results. Now, these are the results I want to achieve. And if I want to achieve those results, then what should I be measuring? And you will get the answers to that. Again, remember, we are talking about human nature. This is not mathematics. So, in human nature, you are going to be measuring some things. You make a note of that. And then you find, well, you know what, this thing I'm measuring really is kind of useless. I mean, why am I measuring that? So, forget it. Put something else. But you will hit the right ones. One of the things that I measure constantly and I find it very useful is to measure what I do with my time. Specifically, every day, what do I do with my time? I can seriously say that there is not a single minute in my whole life which I don't know what I'm doing with. Every single minute of my day, I know exactly what I'm doing with it, and I know why I'm doing that with it. Whether I'm traveling, whether I'm at home, anywhere. So measure that. Measure what is it that you are doing on a daily basis. All right?
Okay, next question. How do we know when to persevere or when?
Ask your heart. Measure and ask your heart. Many times we give up because we fail or we encounter difficulties, not because the difficulty is there for itself, but because we really haven't tried hard enough. Or we haven't really looked at different alternatives. But if you find that eventually, having used all different alternatives, you find that you are beating your head against a stone wall. Remember, if you are up against a stone wall, and if you beat your head against a stone wall, that's bad for the head, not for the wall. So if you are up against a stone wall, find a way of getting around the wall or over the wall or under the wall or blow up the wall or something. But don't use your head for that because it doesn't work. So ask yourself. The whole issue of self-analysis, and as I said, be brutally frank with yourself, is very important. We can only fool ourselves. And sometimes in all good faith, those of us who love us tend to kind of help us to fool ourselves. It's, oh, but you're so tired and doesn't matter. Okay, today it's all right. Instead of saying, well, what on earth are you tired about? Why are you tired? What is this tiredness? That sounds unkind. So people don't want to be unkind, so they try to be kind, and people think they're being kind by permitting poor quality, by permitting sloth, by permitting complacency. They think they are being kind. This is not kind. This is very unkind. Believe me. If you really love somebody, kick them in the you-know-what, if they need it. That's the kindest thing you can do. Sir.
Okay, this question is quite long.
My God.
It is said scream at a tree not to chop it down. The tree dies soon enough by screaming at it. Do you believe this can happen to a person who reports directly to a boss who doesn't teach but screams and ridicules at his staff? Okay.
No. I heard all that. I'm thinking about it. Natives were standing and screaming at a tree.
And the tree will
die
from screaming at it.
Well, I always think to myself, that whenever I'm at this public meeting, I always think that no one can beat that. Now, that's kind of a question which I'm sure I'll never go to hear something, but there's always one better than that, yeah? Like yesterday, I'm sitting in the masjid in IIUM, and we've just now done this religious lecture where I've recited Quran and so on and so on and so on. And guess what question I get? The question I get is, Sheikh, I heard that girlfriends are halal. What do you think? So I said, boy, I wish they were. What do you do? So now there's this one which beats the yesterday's one. Yeah? People stand and scream at a tree and the tree dies. All right. Anyway, forget the tree. I mean, irrespective of what happens with the tree, let me tell you one thing. If I just told you that we should treat people with respect, right? Let me also tell you the other side of it. The other side of it is, you as a person have a right to be treated with respect. Right? So if there is somebody who is screaming at you and who is not teaching you, who is just abusing you, then you have a right to stand up to that person and refuse to take that treatment. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you a backbone and He didn't give you a rope instead of a bone. So stand up and say, sorry, I will not take this treatment. So either you talk like a human being, otherwise, goodbye, thank you to your job, thank you to whatever it is. I don't need you, you are not feeding me, I don't have to take this treatment in order to get a salary. Simple as that. You have a right to be treated with respect. Now, if you don't do that, and many people don't, many people somehow they get intimidated and they feel that, you have to take this nonsensical treatment and you want to turn yourself into a doormat. Well, if you want to turn yourself into a doormat, then people will use a doormat for what they normally use it, to wipe their feet on, and then don't complain because that's where you decided to place yourself. Sir, that's the last question, yes? No? All right.
What if you're not sure what you really want, but you just feel it in your heart that you haven't yet achieved what you really should? Where do you start to act?
Wow.
Another sister, will it?
I don't know. I think sleep over it, let the hangover go away, then it'll become clear. That looks like the state after a long night's party. Huh? You don't know what you want and you don't know where you're going and you don't know. Write things down. One of the ways of clearing this whole thing is to write things down. You know, sometimes I think one of the problems of today's time, really seriously, is as I told you, the first point was eliminate noise, and that's one of the. There's too much noise. There's constantly something. Even while we are driving, there's a radio running or something is happening at home, and the telephones. And my suggestion is, if you are in that kind of a situation, right? Just take some time out, throw away your phone and whatnot, go sit under a tree somewhere quietly, without any disturbance, and ask yourself some basic questions. Say, what is it that I really love to do? Now, people find this very difficult because they say, what do I love to do? I don't know. How can I ask this question? You never asked, you don't know, so to ask. What is it I really like to do? Now, if you are still confused in that, go and do some things. One of the things they do in the UK and the US, and I think it's a very good thing to do with young people, is when they graduate from school and they want to go into a professional college, they actually permit them to go and spend a day or maybe a couple of days in different kinds of industries. So, I may go into the oil refining business, or I might say, well, let me go and work in a hospital for 1 or 2 days because I'm not sure, do I want to be an engineer or do I want to be a doctor? So I actually go and physically experience and see what does this thing feel like. Now, obviously, 2 days will not tell you everything, but it's better than not going at all. So it's a good thing to do. Now, that's the kind of thing you might like to do. So go and look at some of the things that are happening in the world, and then you will get some clarity on that. Right? So ask yourself, what do I really like to do? Also write down. I am a great believer in writing things. I think writing down clarifies the mind, it clears the mind. When you write, you can't be confused. You have to necessarily put things down, in numbers or whatever, lists. So those are helpful things to do if you are in that sort of confused state. Yes, sir.
Okay, last one.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How do I identify my key strengths? Thank you.
Well, that was the answer to your question as well. One way also of identifying key strengths is to ask people who are close to you, who know you well. Because sometimes we tend to ignore our own strengths, and you might have a strength, but you don't really know, you haven't looked at it, and but somebody who knows you well will be able to identify that, will be able to tell you, well, you know what, this is a great strength of yours. And you then need to think about that. Now, remember, one of the things also is that talent, hard work wins every time when talent does not work hard. So, talent is a good thing to have, but in the end, if you want to win, you have to work. Alright? Okay. Jazakallahu khairan. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka Allahumma wa natubu ilayk. Yes, sir.
Sorry.